Good morning, everybody. I think we're right at 9 o'clock, so we'll just go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us on this last day of the meeting. We thank you that you made the time to be with us this morning. Our session title is Shared Research Resources and Central Research Administration, Working Together to Advance Research. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Please remember to silence your phones, and then photography is permitted, subject to speakers' requests to capture information, so you're welcome to take photos. Alexa and I are okay with that. Recordings of the session will be available on the meeting website following the annual meeting. And then ABRF's media, just a reminder about our media policy is that everything can be shared. If a speaker asks that it is not be shared, please respect that. And then do not post any on social media. Hashtags for the event is ABRF 2025. And with that, I really am pleased to be joined by Alexa Dalsem, who is a senior director at UC Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder, and she is the senior director for grants and contracts. And that's also, UC Boulder is also known as Joe Dravengon's institution, for some of you that might not know. So we are pleased that we really have representation. We've really had a long-standing relationship with that institution and member engagement, so we are glad that Alexa could join us for this session. Alexa and I both share common profiles. We all support research in our various roles. Alexa will talk a little bit more about what she does in the Office of Contracts and Grants Administration. And obviously, I support core facilities, and so we've been trying to explore where our common trends are. ABRF and NCURA. NCURA is the National Council of University Research Administration that Alexa represents. She'll talk a little bit more about what NCURA does and some of the common synergies between NCURA and ABRF. And with that, we are pleased to welcome Alexa to really hear about what she does in support of shared research resources at her institution and research broadly. And then I will also do a segment to talk about some of the synergies, how our institution and specifically how Emerging Facility has been able to partner with the Office of Research Administration and other Central Research Administration offices broadly. With that, I want to welcome you, Alexa. Please join me in welcoming Alexa.
Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here with you. I know it's the last day of your conference. They can be fun and exciting and exhausting, so thank you all for being here. We will also have some time for questions at the end, so I hope you have some of those to bring. I'll give a little bit more about my background. As Justine said, I'm Senior Director of the Office of Contracts and Grants at CU Boulder. That's my day job. I'm coming on 13 years at CU, all within the research administration field. I spent about 7 years doing proposals and then have moved up since then into my current role. And then on the side, I'm also a volunteer for the association NCURA, National Council of University Research Administrators. I'm a past chair of Region 7. We have 8 regions, and my region is the Rocky Mountain region. So last year, I helped run our regional meeting, so I've been very impressed with everything at this meeting. It's very well run. It's great to see. I also serve on the traveling workshop faculty, doing presentations around the country, and I serve on this select committee for global affairs, so we have some global work that we do as well. So with that, I will launch into my presentation. A little bit more about NCURA. Similar to ABRF, NCURA is a professional association for people who support research. So that's kind of the very basics of what that organization is. They provide professional development and education. So there are manuals actually for the work that I do, but things are changing all the time, and so we work a lot in the gray with questions that we don't know how to answer. So it's really helpful to have an organization organization to help with that education. We also build a network through that organization, so I'm very fortunate at this point to have an international network of research administrators, so lots of people I can call who have more experience than I do or similar experiences. So if nothing else, we can laugh and cry together. But they're also very helpful for answering questions. Let's see. So a little bit about CU Boulder. I have some fun facts for you to kind of set the stage of where I do my work with my team. We are in Boulder, and we're set against the flat irons, and behind us are the Rocky Mountains. By some surveys, we are one of the most beautiful campuses in the United States, and it really is a beautiful campus. Boulder is a beautiful area. We are at 5,430 feet in elevation, so a little bit high up there. We have some beautiful mountain air. Our streams are fed by the mountain snow, so we have some great water there as well. When I take my kids to other places, they always complain about the water because they're used to Colorado water. We have about 37,000 students, so lots of undergrads, grads, master's degree students, PhDs, doing all kinds of fabulous studying on campus. We have a famous football coach, Deion Sanders. He joined our campus about 2 years ago, has brought so much energy, not just to the football team and games, but also to campus in general. I'll admit I'm not a football fan. I never watched a CU game. I watched lots of soccer, the other football, but he made me watch the CU game, so really fun to have him on campus. We have about 2,000 research faculty, so lots of different research being done on campus. We have 12 research institutes that do the majority of our research as well. And then we have a famous buffalo. This is Ralphie. Ralphie is actually a female bison. She lives on a really nice farm that no one knows where it is. It's a secret location. But she gets to come out at football games and meet all of her fans. So it's a really fun campus, great culture. So this gives you an idea of where we're working. So really important to me, and maybe of most interest to you, is the research we have on campus. In fiscal year 24, these are some of our numbers. So we had about $740 million in new awards. We have about $650 million in expenditures each year related to research. That amounted to about 4,600 awards and gifts that support research. So I pulled out of this our service activities. These are activities that actually often use our core facilities. So we use our core facilities when we have excess capacity to do services. And service agreements come through my office. We did about 113 last fiscal year, about $10 million. So lots of work being done in that area. Service agreements came into my office about, 5 to 10 years ago because we had a PI stealing money for personal use. He was taking trips. He was getting service agreements into his office, not even his department. And it had a very dramatic ending. He was lured back from Russia by the FBI. The FBI arrested him at the airport. So now my office gets to do service agreements. It's a great story. I can share the news article, so I always love the great cases that we can share with each other. This is a look at how our funding is composed. We do about 2/3 of our funding from federal agencies. The state of Colorado is notoriously low in how much they support education, either K through 12 or higher ed. So we have very little state funding. That can be good and bad. It's good in the years that the state funding is bad. It's bad in the year that the state funding is good. And then we have about almost 20% from international partners, nonprofits, and other federal governments. So those are the main sources of our funding. We are the top public funded university by NASA, so about 26%. We have a lot of aerospace work that we do. About 23% from the Department of Commerce. That funds one of our centers. We have funding from National Science Foundation, NIH, DOD, DOE, Department of Education. We'll see if that lasts. We're still waiting for some of our funding to come through from them because there's no one there to issue grants. So hopefully that continues. But this gives you an idea of where our funding comes from. So I will confess that even though I've been at CU for almost 13 years, I had heard the word CORS. I had seen our director of CORS, both Joe Dragavon and our previous director in meetings, but I didn't really know what CORS was, so very sad. But I was excited that this meeting gave me the opportunity to meet Joe. So when I found out what I was asked to speak on, I called up Joe and I said, "Hey Joe, can you tell me what you do?" So I got to find out about the Shared Instrumentation Network at CU Boulder. We have 25 different core facilities that run through Joe's office. I don't know if that's big or small, but to me it's big. I was amazed by how much is handled on our campus by Joe's office. All right, so that sets the stage of where I'm working, what our funding looks like. Every university that has research will have an office like mine, so perhaps you've talked to some of them. I was talking to some of your members yesterday, and I understand that my office, or something similar, is known to be the place for red tape. So the place that slows down your work. I've also heard in other areas that we can be a black hole. So when I meet with my new staff, I tell them, we are red tape. I want you to be the smallest red tape possible. So we are a bureaucracy, but it's really important to me that my staff realize they're also there to support and provide service to our researchers and folks like you. So I'm going to give you an idea of what my office does. You may be wondering, what the heck is a research administrator? Or maybe you feel like you are a research administrator. But these are typically highly trained individuals who know the ins and outs of administrative processes to help support research. So they come from all walks of life. I have people in my office who are former lawyers, teachers, dancers. Lots of teachers tend to like our work, which is great. We are often teaching researchers what they need to do. So they come from all walks of life. There are degrees you can get in research administration, but most people don't have those, so it's a lot of on-the-job training. There's a lot for us to know. So it takes at least 6 months for us to train new staff to get to a point of any kind of independence. So it's not something you can walk in the door and immediately start doing, at least not well. So we often think about our work in the life cycle of a project. That starts with finding funding. My office does not do that. We have a research development office that helps PIs, researchers, find their funding. Our researchers, we are the Wild West at Colorado in a lot of ways. So they find their funding, they apply. Sometimes their chairs have no idea what they're applying for. That's often the case. So they're out there finding their own funding. I also love the researchers who come to me and say, I was at a meeting yesterday and I have someone who wants to give me money tomorrow. Can you sign this agreement? So they are very entrepreneurial that way, some of them. So it hits my door when the PIs are finally ready to submit their proposals. We have about 15 proposal analysts. They are highly trained in the proposal submission process. Every agency has their own way of doing things, their own system. So our team has experts in NASA, NSF, NIH, DOD, and DOE to help other people know how to handle those. They all have their own systems. We also have to know the uniform guidance. Perhaps you've heard of that. It's the overarching federal regulations for grants and cooperative agreements. And also know the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, which is for contracts. So lots of words, lots of acronyms. There's a lot for this team to know. So they're there to support, they're side by side. When I was doing proposals, it was the best way to get to know researchers because I felt like I was in the trenches with them. We were there, we were, getting documents together, we were hitting the submit button together, hopefully not 2 minutes before the deadline, which does happen. So very highly trained staff there doing our proposal submissions. We also have to know a lot of different other areas. So we have to know some HR rules. We have to know what the salary rates are. We have to know what the lowest hourly rate is that we can use on a budget. We have to know how to build budgets. We have to know export controls, some IPs, some research security, IRB, IACUC, just enough to help our PIs get those proposals submitted. And then, hopefully, we have a successful submission. and an award comes in the door. So we are so excited. Everyone's so excited when the money comes in. They're ready to hire their graduate students. They're ready to hire new staff. They're ready to purchase their equipment. And then my officers take a look at the agreement and decide whether or not we can immediately accept it or need to do some negotiations and other review. So we want to make sure that we are accepting the best terms for the university. So a really big part of our work is protecting the university. That is our mindset when we're looking at proposals and awards. So for grants and cooperative agreements, typically we can accept those awards without much issue and get them going. Contracts tend to be the place where we have some work to do. So for University of Colorado as a public institution, we cannot accept things like governing law outside of Colorado. So that could be a place we have to negotiate. We have to look at the IP terms and make sure those are acceptable as well. And then indemnification, so the way that we share liability with another entity is really important. So this is an area where our officers are looking at those terms and conditions, protecting the PI's research. We had a PI sign an NDA on his own. He did not have signing authority, and he basically gave up all publishing rights by signing the NDA. He had a grad student who was finishing her PhD. And we had to get all kinds of special permission in order for her just to have her meeting on her dissertation. So it's things like that that we're looking out for, making sure we can publish, we can use the research, our students are protected, and they can get what they need to get done as well. So finally, we have the award accepted, it's signed. My office worked closely with our Research Financial Services office. So my office is pre-award and non-financial post-award, and then Research Financial Services does our financial post-award. So we send the award off to them, so they set up the account. Finally, the PI is so happy because they can start spending on their award and working on their project. But my team's work is not done. We continue to be there to help out the PIs with award management. So things come up all the time during a project. So there may be a change in the statement of work. There may be a change in the PI or the co-PI. We may need approvals for different kinds of travel or for the equipment purchases. So my team is there to help out. Almost every year we have really sad cases where we have PIs pass away. And this is an amazing place where my staff can step in and support the department through that transition because they know the ins and outs of how to work with sponsors. So there's a lot of care and feeding that goes into that award management process. We are also involved in reporting. So you may or may not know, in the last few years, Congress got really, really interested in having awards closed out and reported on in a timely manner, to the point that if we have one late report by one PI, it can shut down all award acceptance and issuing to our institution. It can even be system-wide. So we have 4 different campuses. It could potentially shut down receiving awards on all of our campuses. So my office is there making sure that those are getting done in time, supporting, again, the researchers and getting them submitted in the right way. And then we're involved with the award closeout process. We do the non-financial part of it, so technical closeout. That's also a big place of interest for Congress. So if we don't close out awards on time, that's another place that we can stop, that can stop us from receiving funding. We work closely with Research Financial Services for them to do the financial side of that. So that's a big overview of all of the things that my office is handling. We have a lot of partners on campus, so CORES, now that I understand what you do, is one of them. We also work a lot with department research administrators. Our campus, it depends on the department, what kind of level of support they have, but we have a lot of support in our institute, so they are handling things sort of closer on the ground with the researchers. So we work with them, and then I've mentioned some of the other offices as well. And this is a visual of what all of those offices look like that we work with. So again, I mentioned that it takes about 6 months to train our new staff members. When I was newer into the field, I met with one of our more senior people, and she told me, 9 years into this, I still don't know everything. And I thought she was crazy. how can it be 9 years in that you don't know everything? And she is absolutely true. I still get questions 13 years in that I don't know the answer to. So I like to say that I run the desk of questions that no one knows how to answer and rule breakers. So questions that no one knows and no one wants to answer. So lots of different areas that we have to deal with, lots of different things that we have to know. Within this picture, my Office of Contracts and Grants is circled there in red. It's on for you, the left-hand side, if you can't see red. We sit under the Research and Innovation Office, which has all of the research administration pieces, so the research integrity, which is our IRB and IACUC and export controls, has research development, which is where our shared instrumentation network and our core sits. We have partnerships and innovation offices, and then we also work closely with EH&S, our research computing, our university council, which I spend way too much time with these days, as well as our campus controller's office. So again, a visual of all of the pieces that go into this. One of the reasons I share this is it gives you an idea of why we're red tape, because there's so many different things involved with our work. Over the last 5 years, you may have heard of research security. This has also been a hot topic for Congress and probably one that will not go away and will continue being of importance. So we had to form a new position, a new part of an office to deal with research security. So that is part of our work as well. All right, so a big part of this presentation is thinking about how Central Research Administration and cores can work together. And CURA's byline is doing research together. And I also think about that as our campus in general. And then now I'm thinking a little bit more about what that means for cores and for research administration. So after my conversation with Joe, conversations with Justine as well as Ken, it's got me thinking about how we can work together, how we already work together, but also how we can do that better. So we have a shared mission and we have shared collaborative work, right? We're all here to support research. That is our job. Our office might work with you on proposal submission. So if you think about those big equipment and instrumentation grants, those are coming through an office like mine to help you submit those. We may be interpreting award terms and conditions together. You know, what can we charge? What can we not charge? Can we, have a service agreement for our instrumentation? Is that an allowable cost? So we're looking at terms and conditions together. When we're considering services for our equipment, we're also looking at, does the sponsor allow us to use this equipment for services? And at what point can we do that? We're ensuring that charges to awards are allowable and allocable, reasonable, and consistent. That's directly from the uniform guidance, something that we have to do with all of our charges. I mentioned the service contracts for equipment, so an area that we often collaborate on. We may be involved together with equipment use rate setting. So when we do our service agreements, we have a different office, our budget and finance planning, who helps with the rate setting as far as what we can charge for our services. So we do some of that work together. There may be places where the equipment that you have can be used for cost share. There's some real restrictions on that, but that's a possible area for cost share. Or you may need cost share in order to get the grant for your equipment. So our office is helping to facilitate some of that. We have many shared processes and areas of process improvements that we can work on together. When I met with Joe, he shared with me that our services team, which is an outstanding, small, mighty team, had recently updated some of their processes to make the service contracts better, easier to use, better for industry. So that's an area where they could work together to make that, to make improvements. The last two items have been really interesting for us in the last 2 months, F&A rates and also adapting to federal policy changes. Last weekend, I was listening to the radio, and within 30 minutes, there was 2 news stories on a national network about grants and contracts. I mean, I was driving, and I about pulled over because it's so astounding to see our work and F&A rates in the headlines. Like, this is crazy to me. But it's really interesting to see it hit the kind of more of the national understanding of what's going on with our research. So in common times. We have F&A rate negotiations that we may work on together. Our F&A rate negotiations include equipment depreciation, so we want to make sure that if you have depreciation included in your rates, it's also not an F&A. So that's an area for us to be collaborating on. But we're also going to be looking at what will it mean if our F&A rates are done differently. So you probably know that there was the initial idea that all NIH awards would have a 15% F&A rate. That has been stalled at this point with the recent budget that was passed. However, there's real support in Congress, both sides, for there to be a different model. So on our campus, we are preparing for different scenarios of what that might look like. Most likely a reduction, so how do we adapt to that? What does that mean for the model of how your equipment is funded? I understand that different campuses have different ways of funding their equipment. It could be direct costs. Someone has state funding, which is incredible. Is it Pennsylvania? Which is incredible. And there's maybe a combination of institutional funding, state funding, F&A. So that F&A funding may or may not be there in the future for us in different ways. Or it may fund your staffing. My office actually is not funded directly on F&A. We're on institutional funding, which is perhaps fortunate for us. In the past, it's been unfortunate because we wanted some of that F&A as we see growth. So it's important for campuses to start thinking about how we will adapt to different F&A rates. And we need to understand what the changes might be, how we can adapt. I think there's some real potential for core facilities to help in that. Yesterday I met with Joe Dragavon and also a representative from another Colorado university, and we're starting to talk about, can we have a state network of core facilities? Can we make that an easier process for our faculty? So that we can be more efficient in how we use our research funding and use it in other areas where we don't have those shared resources. So I'm really excited to keep talking with both of those individuals about how we can start doing that in the Front Range of Colorado. With that, I think I'll turn it over to you, Justine.
Thank you so much, Alexa. Wonderful presentation. So my segment will talk about how our imaging center has really had successful collaborations over the years with central research offices, including Alexa's office. I just wanted to share a little bit about our imaging center, who we are, what we do. We are at the University of Kansas Medical Center, and we provide state-of-the-art imaging resources for investigators both at our University of Kansas Medical Center, but we also serve as a regional resource for about 7 other area institutions. We do clinical and preclinical imaging using human and small animal models, and we have a team of faculty scientists and research support staff that help with study design and experimental design and acquisition of data, and then data management and interpretation, publication, and everything in between. We support KMC investigators, as I've said, and then also regional institution and partners. And we are also a key imaging resource for several NIH federally funded centers and institutes, including the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, which is a P30, a polycystic kidney disease, it's a U54, a CTSA, that's a Clinical Translational Sciences Award, it's also a U54. And then we do some work with the Cancer Center program, and then also we have some COBRIs where an idea state, if some of you know what idea states are, so we support some COBRIs and K-IMBRIs, those are P30s. And then also, in addition to that, we support several investigator-initiated studies, including several R01s, R21s, foundation-funded studies, internal grants that are supported internally. We have about 150 plus investigators and almost 200 individual research projects at various stages. So really a lot of work that we do in support of research. About me, I have been with the center for about 18 years now, and I direct the business of science, as I like to call that. I like to say no margin, no mission. So I really want to work with the institution and all the stakeholders to make sure that we have the resources, we have the capabilities to really move the science forward. I direct resource planning and strategy and then operations. And one thing that I needed to point out here is, as you have seen, we really are a big integrated center with a lot of collaborations, several nodes to different programs and grants. And our work really takes relationships, partnerships, collaborations with all stakeholders. So that's something we constantly have to emphasize. And for me personally, the recognition that our work is not done in isolation, in silos, is very critical. And the work of central offices like Alexa's and others that she has highlighted here is very critical to moving our agenda forward. These are some of the central research offices that we intersect with. These are just a few that I mentioned here. We do intersect with, because we do research with humans, we interact with human participants and our IRBs, institutional review boards, responsible conduct of research offices that deal with that, export controls. I think Alexa alluded to some of that. That's becoming a big deal, so we work with those offices. Conflict of interest in research for our researchers and for us, the staff, animal care and use. We, like I mentioned earlier here, we also do research using small animal models, so we have to work with those offices. Effort commitments on grants. Some of our faculty, imaging faculty and staff have efforts on grants. And so we have to work with central offices to manage those efforts and allocate them appropriately. And when it comes to rate setting and efforts on other grants, we talked about this earlier, we just have to make sure that that's done appropriately and in compliance. And then financial oversights on federal grants that use the imaging center. That's where some of the aspects of the uniform guidance come in, where we have to make sure that what we charge is allocable, allowable, and reasonable. So interacting with central office, various research offices really helps us to stay in compliance, but also be efficient and make sure that we are doing the work correctly and efficiently. So here I'll just share some specific examples of how our imaging center has really collaborated with some of these central offices. These are just specific examples that are unique to shared research resources or core facilities, and mostly my imaging center. We manage grants, managing grants, infrastructure grants that use core facilities for both pre and post award. I know, Alexa, you mentioned that your offices manages that from proposal development and proposal submission, both on pre and post award. Specifically on shared instrumentation grants, NIH stands. We don't do a whole lot of NSF MRIs. We're at the medical center campus, so we don't do a lot of NSF work. But when we do, of course, we intersect with those offices as well. Then we have program grants, as I mentioned earlier, that were a key resource, that P30s, P20s. And so we work with central offices to manage those. And then working with these central offices to track equipment usage reports to sponsoring agencies. That's a whole different animal. Some of you that have shared instrumentation grants from NIH, you know, when that final progress report comes after 1 year or however often, that doesn't stop there. There's a requirement to continue submitting reports, usage reports. I think it's 4 to 5 years now. So we collaborate closely with our central offices to make sure that those reports are in time. Sometimes we have not been able to get those to the finish line in time, but collaborating with central offices, we're able to move those forward and remain compliant. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, compliance for investigator-initiated grants that use our core services, making sure that the charges to those grants are allocable, allowable, allocable, reasonable, consistent, and this sort of all the uniform guidance work that Alexa alluded to here. And then managing cost share requirements on shared instrumentation grants. I'll give some examples here shortly. And then F&A rate negotiations, just making sure that for our shared instrumentation grants, if they are captured into the institution's F&A calculus, then we're not double dipping. Also making sure that if it's a grant, a shared instrumentation grant that's funded federally, then we can't, include it in any F&A calculations or depreciate it. So most of us here might know and appreciate that fact. And then equipment use rate setting, we collaborate with some of the central offices to do that. And then our imaging center does a lot of clinical trials. We support a lot of pharma-sponsored clinical trials, and we rely on the clinical trials office to really help with those contract negotiations. And then our imaging center is part of those contract negotiations for resources that use our imaging center. And then we also do a lot of sequence development, and the Office of Legal Counsel Research Computing and Research contracts, we also use their services to help us with navigating those agreements involving use of intellectual properties and other sequences that we use for imaging research. And then again, most importantly, most recently, just working with these offices to help us figure out policy changes, recent policy changes with executive order that impact core facilities such as ours. Here I'm going to just highlight one or two specific studies where we've really had some successful collaborations with central offices. In April 2023, some of you might recall at the meeting in Boston, I talked to some of you, I was very, very frantic. Our animal imaging program, we lost a magnet, an MRI, and the MRI quenched. And if you're in the magnet world, in the MRI world, a word quench is not what you want to hear very often. It's not a good word. So our MRI quenched, and that really means going from 9.4 field to 0 field. And this was a 20-year-old magnet, but it had done some really, really good work leading up to this. We had recently upgraded electronics, $1.5 million of upgrades to upgrade the electronics, but the magnet itself was a 20-year-old magnet. It was still doing a lot of good work, but then we were doing a helium fill. These are cryogens that keep it chilled, and then it quenched somehow. We had a lot of studies going on that system, time sensitive and really important, so we really, really needed to replace those capabilities in a timely manner. Not very many institutions will have $3 million sitting around to quickly replace an MRI. So who do we look to? The federal government. Few of you might know there's usually a call for shared instrumentation grants around May, at least with the deadline of about May. So our magnet quenched in April. We literally had 1 month to turn that application around, literally 1 month. And so we turned to our central offices, we turned to our user base, we turned to all the stakeholders and partners to really help us be able to apply for a shared instrumentation grant. And within a 1 month turnaround, some of you that have written these grants, you know how involving they can be. Even just getting biosketches from PIs, getting a write-up of projects, it can be a daunting task. And the application itself, management plans, budget planning, forecasting, I mean, it's a lot. Usually it takes like 1.5 years to get these ready and submitted successfully. And for the most part, when you submit these, most people don't get them funded in one go. You have to do a resubmission. Well, we got this one funded in the first round, within a 1 month turnaround. So that was really, really helpful. That was great. And so, yeah. And so really, I can't emphasize how critical it was to collaborate with all partners, including offices like Alexa, to really get us to the finish line. So these are some good, successful stories. Yes, there are some pains. I didn't share some of the pains, but I want to emphasize the gains here. But really, it's a good, successful story. Another case was about a year or so ago. One of our PIs retired untimely. Alexa talked about some PIs passing on, and this one didn't pass, but they retired untimely, unfortunately. And then we were left with 4 instrumentation grants to manage and to figure out how to manage, because there were PI on all these 4 instrumentation grants. 2 of them were NIH STEN's high-end instrumentation grants, and then 2 were HRSA grants. These were congressionally directed funded. Some of you might recall they used to be called like Potbelly, then recently earmarks, and now they're called congressionally directed funding. And so we obtained those pieces of instrumentation from a congresswoman. And so these are a whole different ballgame. They are not your typical NIH stands where everything is sort of standardized. These have a lot of different nuances, from evaluating environmental concerns, from getting property certifications, it's a whole lot, and most of us are not really used to talk about expertise. We didn't really have many resident experts, even in our central offices, that knew a whole lot about managing these grants. And so here we are, the PI has moved on, and we had to identify new PIs, and it wasn't just one PI taking over all the 4, the portfolio of 4. We had to identify different PIs to take over these. And then we had to submit change requests to the funding agencies for the change in PI. Some of them had progress report requirements that we needed to manage. And I don't know if any of you have like NIH S10s. These usually, like the reporting requirements, they only go to the PI. So they're just, tricky, because the S10 portal, only the PI has access to it. Some of you that have these, you might know what I'm referring to. And so just being able to even log into the S10 portal to get access to the report was very, very challenging. So we worked with the Office of Sponsored Programs, with the program office at NIH, with various other stakeholders to really make sure that we were able to submit those reports. We were not timely. We missed a few deadlines there, but we were able to get all of those to the finish line. And then internally, we needed to update internal grant accounts in our accounting systems to the change of PI. So we had really a whole lot to do to manage with that change, but all these offices that Alexa mentioned here were very, very critical to move our work forward. A few of the lessons learned in this whole process from some of the examples that I have given, but also just broadly as in the course of doing our day-to-day job, really engagement with the various offices and stakeholders is very critical. Just building that rapport, building that awareness, like Alexa mentioned here now, that there's awareness about the work of core facilities. There are these opportunities to collaborate, engage, and figure out what's possible. Creating space for understanding is very critical. Not all of us know these things. We are not resident experts on everything. And so creating that space for understanding each other's work, taking time to question, to investigate, to understand, to collaborate was very critical for us and continues to be in our work. And then appreciating the shared mission that we are all in this together to support research wherever we see it, whether it's in the cores, or in the RB office, or in sponsored programs office, or Office of Intellectual Property. Just realizing that we have that shared mission to support the research is very critical. Sometimes it's not really, it's not a given. We just have to keep reminding ourselves that we're in this together to support research at the end of the day. And so we're in this together. And sometimes we don't know it all. We really don't know everything. Like these examples that I've shared with the congressional directed funding, there are so many things we didn't know, but together we collaborated, we asked questions, we reached out to the different parties, the program officers in the HRSA office, legal counsel, we asked questions there, but together we were able to identify some solutions to solve a common challenge. And my most favorite here is extending a lot of grace. Really, just understanding that we all don't know or what we don't know, but we are here that the red tape can be real, but really understanding that we can all work together to support a common shared mission has been critical for my work and for moving the work of my imaging center forward. And with that, we will take any questions.
So this is a question comment for Alexa. And as you know, of course, core facilities, you were talking about all the ways that you can collaborate and you can work with each other. I've got another one that might be really good and help Joe a whole lot. Unfortunately, I've not been able to do this at my institution, so if you can do it, it would be awesome. Core facilities are often challenged at getting publications. So we have to show return on investment, and publications is one of those key metrics. But it's really hard because oftentimes cores are not acknowledged. I know you can't help have the PI put our information in a publication. However, you do, and probably do, I'm assuming, have access to their progress reports. So we will know that a particular core had work done and the PI charged a certain grant. You have the progress report that says what those deliverables are. So it might be possible for you to give Joe that information and he can have the cores say whether or not they supported that research. It would be really, I think, a wonderful way to collaborate and very helpful. If you manage to do this, let me know and we'll try it again.
Thanks for that. So figuring out how to track the projects that CORES supports. Great.
A question for Alexa. So I appreciate that you have brought the research administrator perspective here to ABRF. And my question is there value in the opposite? So I know what NCURA is. I know a lot of the research administrators at our institution attend that meeting. I've occasionally thought, so I'm Jeff Weiss from Northwestern, and I run a program of about 30 core facilities. I've often wondered if there was any value in my attending NCURA, but honestly, when I talked to research administrators, they kind of discouraged me in the sense that they weren't sure there was anything there that would be relevant for what I do. So I'm interested in your opinion about that.
I would say yes. So I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but Ken and Justine attended NCURA annual meeting last year. So I think I actually met them at a dinner. I didn't realize who they were until now. So I would say absolutely. And I understand NCURA may have a cores track now or also some presentations. I would absolutely encourage involvement with NCURA. And I find it interesting, discouraging. It's an amazing group of people, and you can build not only a network, but I think there's value in attending sessions and learning even more about research administration, but also doing your own presentations. So we put out calls both for national meetings and regional meetings every year. I know especially for regional meetings, they are usually looking for speakers and presentations. And I think there'd be real value in cores directors or staff doing presentations for NCURA staff so we can learn more about the work. So I would absolutely say yes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Ken, perhaps maybe you can just share a little bit about some of the work that we've done with NCURA so far and where you see us going forward with that, if you don't mind, please.
So thanks, Justine. Happy to do this. This is a great example of ABRF's collaboration model, where we want to work with allied organizations, whether they are in areas like research administration or technology-specific domains like imaging, genomics, and other areas. As Alexa mentioned, we had the privilege of attending as guests of Incura, their annual meeting last year in Washington. It was a terrific opportunity to meet the Incura leadership, experience a part of their meeting. They also have terrific international collaborations. We were able to meet some of the groups they work with together. But exactly what you're describing is our approach. We want to bring content that's relevant to the ABRF audience here at our meetings, and then reciprocate by presenting content from the ABRF community at relevant organizations and societies. So, Alexa, thank you for that suggestion of perhaps regional meetings for Incura. Also, Incura has an impressive collection of online content and programming. And there are opportunities perhaps for ABRF to work together in developing content to share with the Incura community online as well. So this is, again, a model of an example of how we want to work collaboratively with related organizations. So look forward to building on that partnership.
Thank you.
I'll add, if anyone's interested in doing a presentation at the annual meeting, or Region 6 and 7, which is Rocky Mountains and the West Coast. We'll be in Southern California next year. Let me know. I'd be happy to partner with you to do a presentation about maybe something similar like this, or to help advise on what might be of interest to research administrators. I'd be absolutely happy to collaborate on something like that.
Hi, thanks for your presentations. Scott Edmiston, Stanford University. There are 1,001 laws that you guys deal with and we all deal with, but two that are top of mind are the DOJ final rule on bulk transfers of data to countries of concern, and that contracts have NIST 800-171 in their contracts, like the NIH best practices for data subject to the data sharing rules. So I was wondering if you could comment on how you've been grappling with those, if at all. I'm not sure how they might apply to core facilities. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, DOJ, the regulations on transfer of data. This is one that is with our legal counsel right now to figure out exactly what it means for institutions. There is some carve out for research, but it depends on where the funding is coming from. So I'll say that one is under consideration right now for us to figure out what we need to do to comply with that one. It's a lot. There's a lot of words in that one. So, but we're partly for federal funding. There's a carve out for research. For non-federal funding, that data has a different requirement. So we're still grappling with that one. As far as NIH data sharing, I think their new regulation has been around for a couple of years. So our library has a data management team. So they help with our researchers a lot on their plans, and it's really up to our research. Again, I said we're a bit of the Wild West. We rely on our PIs to make sure that data is being shared. One thing that does come to mind with cores and data sharing is it may be helpful to understand the different levels of confidentiality with data. You may already be familiar with PII and PHI if you're at a health or medical institution. But there's also controlled unclassified information, CUI. And that has a whole different requirement than the normal data. It's somewhat similar to PII and PHI, but a little bit more. So it may be helpful to have a basic understanding of that. DoD has a public training on controlled unclassified information. I think it's about an hour long. So if your institution doesn't have a training on CUI, it's a good one to have awareness of, to know what that means and how to identify it and what to do if you see it. So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, there's definitely a lot around some data sharing requirements.
My question is about FN negotiation. The negotiation means to me that there is a exchange of push and pull, etc. How far or can you share at your institution, how far is the actual rate from the negotiated rate?
Yes, yeah. I'll share a little bit about the process too, and then our actual rate is I think it's somewhere around 65%, and our negotiate rate currently is about 56%.
Is the negotiated rate always under?
Yes.
They don't give you more than
The federal
Well, I
government, this is part of the argument of keeping research at universities. They get a really good deal. If you worked with industry, sometimes they have a 200% rate. So we are a really good deal for research.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my second is more a comment. I think when in your presentation, you said you are there to represent or protect the institution. And sometimes I find that that collides with the investigators' needs or requests. And so that's, we do want to work collaboratively. We want to partner with research administration, but sometimes it's so obvious that the primary goal is to work for the institution and not the specific department that, I don't know. Yep.
No, that's a very good point. Yeah. So, my office has that university-wide perspective. So, for instance, we don't want the PI signing an NDA and the student can't then get their PhD, right? So we're looking university-wide. We do try to get to yes, so try to do some creative thinking as much as possible to support the PIs and where they want to get to. It's fairly rare that we can't figure out a contract. Sometimes it does take a long time. Part of the other thing that we see, the hardest sponsors to work with are industry. A lot of industry hasn't worked with universities before, especially small businesses, and we have very different ideas of what we want. We're not a for-profit. My institution's not for-profit. Companies are. There's different understandings around IP. So yes, I agree. Some of that rub comes with, we have this university perspective, and PIs are thinking about, I need this for my lab. But we do try to get to yes as much as possible. Thanks for pointing that out.
So I'm Andy Opp from Northwestern University. I have the honor of being the signatory for our service agreements.
Oh, congratulations.
I'm wondering what the advantages are of placing, that role within contracts and sponsored research where you have all these small agreements right next to relatively large agreements. And my other question is, how much negotiation do you allow on these agreements? Because I find some of these, the legal reviews are approaching the cost. Costs are approaching the value of the agreement, and I don't know how you guys handle that.
Yeah. So we are fortunate to have a services team within our office. So the services agreements are not competing with our research agreements as far as time. But it does give that services team access to people with more experience because they're a newer team. So I find real advantage. They also have proposal support for that work, and then they have some expertise and supervisors to rely on when they have questions that come up. So it seems to work well. I don't think if we had had a choice we would have taken them, but there was no other place for them to live, so we adopted them. So yeah.
And as far as negotiations go, do you allow that, or how does that work?
Yes, we do. We do have standard terms for service agreements that we try to use because that does make the process faster. Besides industry, we actually have a lot of service contracts with school districts, and they are extremely challenging to work with, maybe even more than industry. For good reason, they're trying to protect the students. But we do need often to negotiate with school districts as well. So yeah, so we do have some negotiation on those for sure.
Hi, George Grills from the University of Miami. Great session. So I have a comment and a question. The comment is our cores have a very close relationship with our Office of Research Administration. And one of the things, for example, that has been very useful is Research Administration gives us information about the grants behind the funding accounts that are being used to pay for services. So we are actually able to know what grants, the funding sources, and the amounts of those grants that are being used for essentially how our shared resources are supporting existing grants. So that's been very useful in terms of reporting on impact.
Nice.
But the other part of this is we'd really like to better track how our core facilities and shared resources support new grant awards. One of the ways we'd suggested doing this is typically, as typical at most institutions, when an investigator wants to put in a grant proposal, they put a form in advance saying they're going to be putting in a proposal. And there's questions on that, and one of the questions is, we've suggested is, are you going to use any shared resources, and if so, which ones? We have research administration in principle is very happy with this idea, but the problem is how to actually implement it. If you have 60 cores, you don't want to have a list of 60 cores for people to check off on. But this would be very useful, both for the cores to have a heads up that a grant is being put in that will use them, but also in terms of the assuring that whoever's writing up the grant is talking to the core, so that we actually know that it will be technically feasible, and that the budget is actually realistic and not, is actually related to the actual fee for services. My question is, how do you or anyone in the audience, how do their research administration folks help facilitate tracking of shared resource or core facility support for new grant awards?
That's great, and you give me a new idea of a project to work on with Joe. So we do have a proposal submission request form similar to this with lots of questions on it. I don't have a great answer. I'm trying to think of how we might manage that with our systems, but it makes absolute sense to ensure that what's promised in the award can be done, and also that we have the right budget for it. So I don't know if other universities have a solution for this yet.
I'll just mention what we do at the University of Kansas Medical Center. We have a form similar to what you mentioned. Fortunately, we don't have a listing of 60 cores. Usually it's about 5 or 6 that a grant would use at any one point. But yeah, it's a drop-down list, so you pick and choose. Then that's on the proposal preparation stage. So proposals tag which core facilities they are going to need to use, and then we go through the process of quoting and providing budgets and all. We have a system where we provide budgets and other information. And then on the post-award, there hasn't been a really great way, but what we have done is we've partnered with our financial offices and data analytics. We're able to tag grant accounts that actually use core resources. So they built this whole great database that queries which grants have used core facilities based on the charges. So we're able to report out of that.
No, that's really good. And a related thing here is that when a core helps support a new grant award by writing materials and methods or whatever, so often we don't know if the award was actually given, and if the award was given, whether or not the awardee actually uses the core after all that work. And so it'd be really nice, to have some mechanisms to do that. And my suggestion is that, we leverage the ABRF to pull together best practices in this area so that none of us need to reinvent the wheel. Thanks.
Hi. I was curious about the research officer position or research security. What was the need and what are the tasks that person's doing? I'm kind of just curious.
Yes. So there's a couple regulations that require this. NISPOM 33, which is a presidential memorandum 33, which actually came out under the first Trump administration and was upheld under Biden, still is in process, and also CHIPS Act. So both of those, at least NISPOM 33 requires that if you have a certain amount of funding, I think it's 50 million or more from the federal government, you have to have a point person on campus who's your research security officer. And then there's requirements under NISPOM for training. So DOE is going to be the first one to implement this in May of this year. Required research security training for all PIs and co-PIs on DOE, actually starting at proposal, so on proposals. Justin Mack is our research security officer. So Justin oversees the research security program. A number of federal agencies, NIH, NSF, DoD, DOE, also now have a review matrix they do before an award is made. And if they have red flags related to research security, typically it's business with China, anyone who has ties with China. They will reach out and say, we need a mitigation plan. And so Justin oversees that piece as well. We have some classified work, so he does that as part of his job as well. And then, so those are the main areas. There's going to be a new requirement if NISPOM 33 continues, also for travel approvals for international travel. So those are the main areas that he's working in. He also is friends with the FBI.
All right, my name is Ben Abrams. I'm at University of California at Santa Cruz. Thank you very much for this great session and for highlighting and providing case studies of some benefits of the really well-integrated research support structures. Alexa, I have a question specifically for you because you mentioned some of the things that your university system has been considering in reaction to this proposed F&A cuts, and you had mentioned creating a state network of core facilities. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on some of the other things that have come up as proposed solutions or mitigation measures to that, to what's going on with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Depending on what the F&A rate might look like, at one point we were thinking, okay, if it's 15% for all federal agencies, what does that mean for us? And part of the consideration is, can we actually support all of the research that we have on campus? Would we need to perhaps narrow some of our focuses? We're also looking at, and actually there's a session after this one that this model will be highlighted, but having a shared service group for research administration so we can find some efficiencies in that way. So looking at those sorts of efficiencies. I'm trying to think of what else. Those are some of the main things so far. It's up in the air as far as what the rate's going to look like in the future. But it's kind of this idea of finding efficiencies, narrowing focus, as well as broadening who we get funding from. So are we going to go after more industry partners? And then if we do, making sure that our processes work better for industry. We have had work with the United Arab Emirates. We have quite a lot of funding from them. We help them put a satellite around Mars. And so we're looking at, are there more international partners? Because they maybe have some funding that we can go after. So looking at that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Alexa. Andy from Oregon Health Science University. I was just wondering, you said that before you didn't know much about cores. Now that you know more about cores, how does that change things for you and your colleagues going forward?
Yeah, that's great. So I love learning about new things. That's partly why I like my work. So first of all, I'm super excited to learn about cores and the work that you all do. But it also gives me some information for my staff to bring back. I love the idea of thinking about how we can do better work at the proposal stage to connect with cores. I think it's helpful for our staff. I sometimes feel like we're like the hub and a whole bunch of spokes, so PIs come to us with all different kinds of questions. So potentially by my staff knowing about cores, when they get questions, they can spread the word as well. Really excited about the idea of looking at this kind of regional network of cores as well, and how we can make that better. So if nothing else, it gives us this new toolbox for us to use in our work in supporting PIs and also in research.
So Josh from Boston College. So there are several areas where I guess people who work in cores and support cores and core administrators and core users and central admin can have sort of different perspectives on a topic. And one topic that comes up again and again, and this has been at multiple institutions, is the salary support for core staff. And in particular, what I mean is, so for example, a P30 can have different kinds of models, but sort of one perspective on direct support of cores. And then obviously we've got recharge, but then there are some cases where individual PIs can put core staff as percentage effort on like their R01s and stuff. And in some places that's discouraged, in some places that's encouraged. And I guess it'd be really interesting to hear from both of you from the point of view of somebody who is managing a core and somebody who is central, more central admin. Like, what are your perspectives on that question? Like, if someone came to you and said, and also, of course, indirects, can also play a role in this to some extent. So, what's your perspective on, best practice, or what's maybe a no-go zone, or what should be discouraged or encouraged in terms of like salary support for core staff?
God, that's great. I think I have. You made me think of something really quick. Ben from UC Santa Cruz. The other thing we're looking at is what can we direct charge that we don't currently direct charge. So depending on how FNA rate changes, but that's what, right? What can we direct charge?
That's a whole other topic. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the other thing is what can we direct charge on projects that we don't already. So my question, if this came to me, would be, what is the benefit to the project? So any direct charge on a project has to have a direct benefit to that project, right? So if you could show, I'm going to make this up because I'm making it up. So if I have a staff member who's running this equipment just for this project, I could see that being direct charge. But if it's this staff member is running this equipment for 5 different projects, that would be harder to charge. So it has to have a very direct benefit for the good of that specific project.
And that's really where you get into the uniform guidance. It has to be allowable, allocable, and reasonable. I think there are a lot of other words, but yeah, allocable is, I think, the key word here. You can easily allocate that effort or that activity to that project.
But if I can follow up, but even, there's no one behind me, so I can. We've got 5 minutes. So even if all that's true, like, for example, I mean, just full disclosure, like, I was in a position where I was told by my faculty advisory committee as a core director that, like, people could not put me down as percentage effort because we had such a broad user base and it wouldn't be fair.
Wouldn't be fair?
Yeah.
To whom?
To the other users. If I was basically like a paid consultant on a project, even if all of those boxes were ticked and it was within my area of expertise and I was going to really benefit it, 10% of my time going to one PI when my facility served 200 PIs could be seen as, an unfair allocation of my time.
Interesting. It's actually a good thing for us. We do that all the time. As long as that 10, 25% that you give to that PI, you're not double dipping it into the core.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, it has to be pulled
I think
out of
that's
the cost
really,
study, but
I think it's institutional policy and interpretation. At my institution, we do that routinely.
All right, I'll let Joe talk because I'm sure he has a lot to say.
Hi, Joe Dragowitz.
Oh, hey, it's Joe.
It's me.
This is the Joe he's talking about.
First of all, thanks for making me sound amazing. That's not true. It's a huge team at CU Boulder. We're very fortunate that they're invested in our success and have become extremely approachable. To the question earlier posed by George, sort of like the checkbox, are you using a core? The method I've been thinking about, and actually working with people lower in the office to see if we can do, is we don't want to be the burden, right? No one wants to slow stuff down, but we want to get there on the proposal stage, so the pre-proposal is great. The problem comes to scale. If we have a few cores like we do, they can all come to me and then I can disseminate it. But if you have 90 or 100 with this massive drop-down list, that becomes, no PI wants to fill that out. So, a lot of it just comes down to coordination and figuring out what we can use. So we're currently discussing this. We didn't talk about this yesterday, but I look forward to working with you more on it. I think it's going to be very impactful for us. So, great.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. I'm excited to hear that.
Awesome. We just have a little under 2 minutes to go. I want to give an opportunity to Ben. Sorry to put you on the spot. Ben Wright. You've served in both roles, both in the sponsored programs office and then now in core facilities. And this I just want to hear your perspectives on how that has worked, and this could be a nice segue to your presentation in the next, hour.
Yeah, everyone, come 10:45 in Bronze 4. We're having a wonderful presentation on this topic. Thanks, Justine, for the the shameless plug there. No, I think, I always preach about keeping open lines of communication between a lot of different offices. I speak from kind of the core facility perspective in my current role, but I had a previous role within our office of sponsored programs. And I think it's just as much the responsibility of the core facility to open those lines of communication as it is for, the central contracts and grants office. So I think it's something that both parties can do. And just because that line of communication doesn't exist currently doesn't mean that it can't be opened. 1045 Bronze 4.
And with that, we want to really thank you all for coming and for your attention and lots of good discussions, and let's continue this momentum. Thanks again. And thank you, Alexa.